Welcome to the deep dive. Today we are taking a deep breath and plunging into a really detailed energy modeling study. It's both a warning and maybe a roadmap for a nation facing some huge challenges.
Yeah, a really important one.
We're looking closely at the source, current energy policies and possible transition scenarios adopting renewable energy. A case study for Bangladesh. Our mission really is to pull out the key insights. This study used the high-resolution LUT energy system transition model to map out Bangladesh's energy future from 2015 right through to 2050.
And to really get why this study matters, you need a bit of context on Bangladesh. It's developing fast, yes, but it's incredibly dense. We're talking about, nearly 1,100 people per square kilometer?
Wow, tanks in 79. Yeah, that's like a major city's density, but for the whole country.
Exactly. And their electricity demand has been just soaring, about 9.7% average growth each year between 2004 and 2015.
So huge development needs. But they're also up against this kind of existential clock, aren't they?
They really are. Two big things. First, climate change vulnerability. It's extreme. The study points out a 1-meter sea level rise that could flood a fifth of the entire country. So decarbonizing isn't just nice, it's, existential.
A fifth of the country, that's huge.
It is. And second, their current energy mix is looking precarious. Back in 2016, almost 92% of their power came from fossil fuels, mostly gas, some furnace oil, diesel.
Okay.
But here's the kicker. Their own domestic natural gas. It's running out fast. The study estimated it would be gone within 15 years from 2014. So roughly around 2030, maybe a bit later.
Right when demand is spiking, their main domestic fuel source is disappearing. That sounds problematic.
Problematic is putting it mildly. It's a potential crisis, which is exactly why this study modeled these 4 different futures, these scenarios, to see which path actually worked.
Okay, let's unpack those scenarios then. How do they set them up?
Right, so they have 2 main pairs. The first pair are the current policy scenarios, CPS and CPS-NCC. These are basically built on Bangladesh's own official plan from 2016, the Power System Master Plan.
Okay, so what does that path look like?
It relies heavily on imports, building new coal plants, new gas plants using imported gas, and also nuclear power. And a big chunk of power, 15 to 25%, would actually just be imported electricity until 2041 under that plan.
So the current plan is essentially swapping out dwindling local gas for dependency on imported coal, gas, nuclear fuel, and even imported electricity.
That's pretty much it. Swapping one dependency for another, arguably riskier external one.
Got it. And the second pair of scenarios?
Those are the best policy scenarios, BPS and BPS-NCC. These are way more ambitious. They aim for a completely renewable energy system 100% by 2050.
100% renewable. How?
By basically saying no new fossil fuel plants get built after 2015, with maybe just a few exceptions for gas in one version. It's a mandate for rapid adoption of their own clean resources.
Okay, CPS is imports and fossil fuels. BPS is renewables.
Yeah.
And the NCC difference.
Yeah.
That's the carbon cost thing.
Exactly. BPS and CPS were run with a cost on greenhouse gas emissions factored in, like a carbon tax, And it ramps up quite steeply, reaching 150 euros per ton of CO2 equivalent by 2050.
Okay.
The NCC versions, no carbon cost ran the same scenarios, but without that financial penalty for emitting carbon.
So if the BPS-NCC scenario, the renewable one without the carbon tax, still comes out on top.
Then it means renewables win purely on cost and technology. You don't even need the government pushing with a carbon price for it to be the best economic choice.
That's a really important test then, an economic acid test, like you said.
Precisely.
All right, we know the setups. Let's talk results. Which path leads where, especially on cost?
Right.
Because the study's predictions here are, they seem pretty dramatic. Let's focus on LCOE.
Right, the levelized cost of electricity. And just quickly for listeners, LCOE is basically the total lifetime cost to produce 1 unit of power, building the plant, fuel, running it, everything. It's the real bottom line cost.
So what did this study find for the current policy scenarios, the CPS ones?
Not good. The LCOE trends upwards pretty sharply, actually. It ends up being the highest cost path in all the years they looked at. By 2050, the LCOE under the current policies is projected to be a massive 69% higher than it was in 2015.
69% higher. That's baking huge energy inflation into their future economy.
It really is. Now, contrast that with the renewable-focused BPS scenarios. Here you see almost immediate savings. The LCOE actually drops by 20 to 28% by 2020.
It drops. How So quickly.
Because the model phases out the most expensive stuff first, those old oil and diesel generators. Cutting those high fuel costs gives you savings right away.
Okay, that makes sense. So fast forward to 2050, what's the final cost comparison?
By 2050, the cost difference is stark. The LCOE for that fossil fuel-heavy CPS path is projected to be 58% higher than the renewable BPS path.
58% higher.
Oh.
So the solar-heavy renewable path is just flat out cheaper in the long run.
According to this model, yes. Significantly cheaper. But you raised a good point earlier. What about the upfront cost? Renewables need big initial investment, right?
Yeah, that's the classic argument. How does a developing country manage that capital expenditure compared to maybe easier financing for a gas plant?
That's where LCOE is so useful. Because solar and wind fuel is free, that higher upfront cost gets paid back and then some over the decades of operation with zero fuel bills. This study, factoring in falling tech prices, finds the total long-term cost, the LCOE, is much lower for the BPS path, even with that initial build-out.
Okay, so the lifetime cost wins out, and the environmental side must be just as stark.
Oh, completely different worlds. The BPS scenario, the 100% renewable one, gets to zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2050. Problem solved, basically, on the climate front.
With zero emissions.
And
Current policy path.
it's disastrous, frankly. Emissions just keep climbing. The study projects a 981% increase in greenhouse gas emissions by 2050 compared to 2015 levels, reaching 256 megatons of CO2 equivalent.
Wow, nearly 1,000% increase for a country that vulnerable to climate change. That seems untenable.
It really does. It's completely at odds with their survival, let alone development. But then we get to that aha moment you mentioned, the BPS NCC result.
Right, the renewable path without the carbon tax pushing it.
Exactly. Remember, they removed the financial penalty for emissions.
Hmm.
And even without that push, the model found that renewables would still make up 94% of electricity generation by 2050.
94%, just based on cost.
Just based on cost competitiveness. The system naturally optimized towards the cheapest way to generate power, and that was overwhelmingly renewables, specifically solar and batteries.
So let me get this straight. Even if policymakers ignored climate change entirely, the pure economics point towards renewables being the cheapest option.
That's what this modeling strongly suggests, yes. It flips that old narrative, doesn't it? That green energy is a luxury you pay extra for.
It absolutely does. It suggests the economic choice and the environmental necessity are actually aligning now.
Precisely. It's not a trade-off anymore, it's a convergence.
Okay, so if BPS is the winning path, what does that future actually look like? What's the tech mix? Because getting to 100% renewables, especially in a dense country, sounds complex.
It is complex, but the model shows a clear pathway. It really leans into Bangladesh's great solar potential. They get solid sunlight, averaging 1,095 to 1,460 kilowatt hours per square meter per year.
Pretty good solar resource then.
Definitely. So solar PV, both big solar farms and rooftop panels, becomes the absolute backbone of the generation system in those BPS scenarios.
But land is such a premium there. We talked about the density. Can they actually fit enough solar panels? That's always a concern raised.
It's a fair question, and the study looked at it closely, even modeling a huge amount of solar, 357 gigawatts of ground-mounted panels by 2050 in the BPS scenario.
357 gigawatts. That sounds like a lot of land.
It does, but the calculation showed it would only require about 1.9% of the country's total land area.
Only 1.9%.
Yeah, and if you look just at the land that's not already used for farming or forests, the model actually put a limit, saying you could only use 6% of that available area the solar farms needed, only used about 10% of that limited available space.
So well within realistic limits, especially if you add rooftop solar too. Land isn't the showstopper, people might think.
Seems that way, yeah. But of course, solar is intermittent, so the other key piece is storage.
Right, batteries.
Exactly. Utility-scale battery systems, plus batteries installed by homes and businesses, what they call prosumer capacity, they really start appearing around 2025 in the model, and they become crucial.
How crucial?
By 2050, the model projects battery output covering 50 to 55% of the total electricity demand in the BPS scenarios. They're essential for shifting that daytime solar peak to meet demand overnight and in the evenings.
Half the demand covered by battery output.
Okay.
But there's that other wrinkle.
Yeah.
The monsoon. What happens from May to October when cloud cover cuts solar generation way down? How does 100% RE handle months of lower sun?
Yes, the monsoon challenge. Days 175 to 275 in the model's year. Solar generation definitely dips, and this is where the system gets quite innovative. It doesn't rely on imports.
So what does it do?
It uses synthetic natural gas, or SNG.
Synthetic gas. How does that work?
During the sunnier months, when there's actually excess renewable electricity being generated, instead of wasting it, the system uses that extra power to create hydrogen and then combines it with CO2 potentially captured to make methane, synthetic methane. That's SNG. It's called the power-to-gas process, P2G.
So you're basically converting surplus clean electricity into a storable, clean gas fuel.
That's the idea, like bottling sunshine in a way. And
And
then,
store it somewhere.
yes, they can use existing gas storage infrastructure pipelines, tanks infrastructure that might otherwise become useless as natural gas runs out.
Okay.
Then, when the monsoon season hits and solar output drops significantly, they draw on that stored SNG.
And use it how?
They feed it into their existing gas power plants, the combined cycle, CCGT, and open cycle, OCGT turbines. These plants are flexible and can handle the synthetic gas.
So they don't need to scrap all their gas infrastructure. They just switch the fuel from fossil gas to clean, synthetic gas made from their own renewables.
Exactly. It's a really smart way to repurpose assets and handle that deep seasonal variation without resorting back to fossil fuels. It integrates the whole system.
That is pretty ingenious.
Yeah.
But it highlights the alternative, right? The current path, relying on imported fossil fuels as domestic gas runs out. This study flagged some serious national risks with that approach, didn't it?
Oh, absolutely. This becomes a major national security issue. If domestic gas is mostly gone by around 2031, pursuing that current policy scenario means almost total reliance on imported coal, imported gas, and foreign nuclear tech and fuel. That's the textbook definition of energy insecurity.
Constant exposure to global market swings in politics.
Right. Every geopolitical crisis, every fuel price spike decided elsewhere hits Bangladesh directly in the wallet. It creates huge economic vulnerability, something using domestic solar avoids completely.
And there's the sociopolitical angle too, right?
Yes, the sociopolitical vulnerability. We talked about the climate threat. For one of the world's most vulnerable nations to choose a path that increases its emissions nearly tenfold, well, that fundamentally undermines public trust and stability. It exacerbates the existential threat they already face.
And finally, the risk of just wasting money.
Stranded assets, that's a huge one. The study warns strongly against sinking billions into new coal and nuclear plants now. Renewables are already winning on cost globally and getting cheaper. Building expensive, carbon-heavy plants today makes it highly likely they'll become economic burdens, basically useless investments, long before their planned lifespan is over.
So you build a new coal plant, and 10 years later, it can't compete with solar plus storage.
Precisely. And then the country is stuck paying off the debt for a useless asset. It's financially irresponsible compared to investing in the clearly cheaper, cleaner future tech.
The message seems incredibly clear then. The current policy path looks expensive, dangerous for the climate, and risks locking in stranded investments.
That sums up the warnings pretty well.
So let's bring this deep dive to a close. The findings from current energy policies and possible transition scenarios adopting renewable energy, a case study for Bangladesh, seem remarkably consistent. Focusing on their own renewable resources, especially solar PV paired with batteries, offers Bangladesh the lowest cost energy system by 2050.
It does. It appears to solve that energy trilemma, hitting security, reliability, and affordability all at once.
Which leads to a pretty profound conclusion, doesn't it?
I think so. The study, particularly that BPS-NCC result showing renewables win even without carbon pricing, suggests the main roadblocks aren't technical or even economic anymore. Those barriers are falling fast.
So what's left?
It really seems to come down to political will and building the right institutions to manage this kind of massive, rapid change. The study mentions strengthening bodies like ISREDA, the Sustainable and Renewable Energy Development Authority. They need the institutional muscle to make this transition happen.
The path seems clear from the analysis. The challenge is navigating the transition itself. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into current energy policies and possible transition scenarios adopting renewable energy, a case study for Bangladesh.